There are two groups of tools that we use for bowl turning. One is called a standard gouge, and the others are called fingernail gouges, or as Ed calls them, roughing tools. But I have a problem with that because these fingernail type gouges with the ears cut back can do some amazing finish work. And they're swept back, yeah, there's a lot of names for them. I went to the catalogs to see what they called them, and there were different names there too. And incidentally, when I started, these hadn't been invented. They weren't in the catalogs, they weren't in the literature. There were only these bowl gouges back in the early 70s. And that's how old some of these tools are. So, but these guys have turned into the workhorse. They'll do almost all your bowl, like 90% of it sometimes. But you can do all the same stuff with these tools, with the standard gouges. So these are the
underneath that camera, and I'll get a shot of it.
Like I can't see what you see, but
Oh.
That's great.
And different turners who commercially promote their tools have different grinds, but they're either swept back like this or they're cut straight across like this. And they come in different sizes. This is a 3/4 inch long and strong bowl gouge, it's called. It's even these aren't available anymore that I've seen in the catalogs, but these can really shovel out the wood.
Is that like a Buck Brothers?
No, that's
Is that
Sorby.
carbon?
That's Sorby.
What angle do you usually use for your grinds for your standard and your swept back?
Like an angle.
Yeah, what grind angle?
Well, I grind it to whatever the original grind is, but it's
Okay.
usually around 55 degrees.
Yeah.
So the beauty of these is these swept back ones, it's a very simple explanation, a very simple, predictable tool and a way to hold it. Whereas the standard bowl gouge takes a more complex movement. So what we start with is these, I'd say there are 3 requirements. And one is that you hold it horizontal. That's not hard. I position the flute at about 1030, 45 degrees. That's a prerequisite. But you can turn it up to get more wood and turn it towards 90 degrees to get less if your wood is misbehaving. And the third thing is try to be at 90 degrees to whatever you're cutting, the section you're cutting. And I'm going to start demonstrating that first cut. And it's used to shape your bowl. It's used to hollow your bowl. It can do just about everything. And it's used to do finishing cuts on the outside and some on the inside. Now, the first cuts I do, I'm not even going to touch the wood because when it's spinning, I can't see it. I want to make sure it's just barely clipping this because it's not round and I don't want it slamming into the blade. Well, let's see what happens. Whoops, clipped it. Now I'm cutting less and less air So I'm getting a little bit more aggressive. Starting to take the high spots off. And it's starting to come into balance. I'm still keeping it horizontal. 1030, 90 degrees for the wood. Probably taking 1/8 of an inch or more to cut. And if you want a better view, there's room for people to stand back here and actually see it. That's how you test it. No, no flats. No flats. Uh-oh.
I can move your chairs up. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The ball dries when you start to clear it with the air.
So I've got a spur center on here. And when you have that on a piece of cherry like this, it gives you the opportunity to balance the grain, which is what David talked about in the last meeting. Which
Explain that again?
balancing the grain means you can change the orientation of the axis by changing where these
So essentially, like
centered.
the sapwood is in the middle.
Right,
Right
you,
there.
you might want to make them hit at the same point down here and make it balanced. Now, this is balanced on one side, one dimension. Right there and right there are at the same level. But over here, it's out of balance. You can see this comes way up and this is very low.
Oh. You might
And
adjust it at this point.
I could move the center over this way a little bit and it would bring this down and that up, but not today. The,
Theory.
but I bring this up because
Now the rest of the story.
the spur center, every time your tool goes into the air and slams into the wood, it widens these little tooth marks where they bites in, and you should crank this in frequently initially, which I didn't, and so it stripped, but it's still holding. And I'm gonna try to get a spigot turned on here for a bigger chuck, for a real chuck. Now I'll use a different cut when I get down a little ways here. Yeah, I'm still trying to stay 90 degrees to what I'm cutting.
Usually, you'll hear that tool chattering. You don't have to turn the machine off to take a look at it. You know you're coming to the wood.
And that's where it's going in and out of the bark.
Yeah.
At this point.
He almost did it. He didn't pump it together his hip. One of the rocks.
Got ballroom dancing? Ballroom. I switched tools to get a sharper one.
The bark was on the tool, so.
So I'm going the other direction here. There's no rule about which direction except do what works best.
Well, I feel like you've got it. So, we both have one thing. Top of the water. That's pretty fresh, Mike.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure, I think it makes.
This is a go, no go tool. It tells me if it's gonna fit the chuck or not.
Oh, I
Now-
like that.
Show us that one again.
You just make one that's got the maximum dimension of your chuck. Just a scrap of wood and see if it goes over. So I'm gonna use a scraping cut, which means instead of having your flute at 10:30, turn it up to nine o'clock where both edges are touching the wood, and then turn it to about 10 after 9. So the top blade is not touching the wood. The bottom is barely scraping. The heel is nowhere near the wood. If you're cutting, then the heel is very close to the wood. The heel being the angle between the gouge and the grind. So I'll use that to smooth off this business where the chuck is going to go. And the difference here you see is the tool is no longer at 90 degrees to the wood. The whole edge is cutting. And it's turned right up to almost 9 o'clock. It's a good start for finishing. It flattens the wood. It takes out the grooves left by the rough cut. I can use it this way. Or I can use the roughing cut at 90 degrees to that face. But I do have to be very careful I can get a catch, because when it hits that corner, It's no longer 90 degrees to what's cutting. You want to be here. Because if that catches, things can go flying. Airborne. Now there, I'm gonna put a little bit of a dovetail on that. And looks like I've got almost all the flats out. I'll use the same scraping cut to get the dovetail.
From your first cut on the bowl to this point, how many different tools have you used?
I've used only this one. I had another one that was identical. And I'm gonna try.
The hardwood before do that clean, so you have more strength, it doesn't matter. Like when you're in the sapwood,
Yeah,
that piece, like would you wanna get down into the hardwood of that for like for cherry?
no.
It doesn't matter.
The problem is they both cut really nicely. If you're doing a demo, you want wood that's really well behaved. Ed used mahogany that cuts like butter. And this is wet cherry. It sap lubricates the blade. It cuts beautifully. It makes you look like a good wood turner, whether you are or not. Now I'm going to try and true up this face. I'll again use the roughing cut. It's a little difficult to get in there at 90 degrees. So you should be able to turn left or right-handed.
I want to emphasize that. We learned the term of clothing. Good idea. The problem is I never know which is what hand.
I think it's time to rechuck. There's a lot we can do. A lot we have to do with the open end. And this is,
Using one tool with somewhat of a sweat background, you basically roughed it in, put some finishing cuts on it if you want.
probably do those once I get it flipped around, because there's some big tear outs there.
Okay.
So this big spur drive is really useful.
Not see that? What those?
I can start a fairly good sized bowl with it.
One is on, bird drive. You find out, goes directly on.
Stubby.
Onto the spindle. It's got killer removable blades that you can sharpen, and the point you can move back and forth. They're very sturdy, husky kind of tool. You want to take two blades out, you're going to do cross training, you can use that. Kind of the best one I've seen that allows you. I think it makes the thing called a big bite, which is like sticking a big blade into the jaw. I don't particularly like that. I think this one was. I think that one that it was 10 wise. I think it's. It's Nova.
Do you take a Forstner bit and put a level surface before you use that?
Oh, you mean that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, chip off the bark. I don't necessarily have to use. Or just chip it off with the chisel and then just set that thing in, that drill a little hole so that the center point goes in.
Is that made by Stubby?
No, it's made by Nova.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, Nova.
So anytime you rechuck, it's likely to be out of round, and it is in this case. So we can true it up using the roughing cut again.
You can open my pushes or pull. Two ways to do the cut, right? Push cut, pull cut.
Right.
What the heck?
Not behaving well. Okay. So So this is what I call a finishing cut. It's a little different from what Ed did in the demo on YouTube. The way I started is I put the heel against the wood and the blade off the wood. And very gradually bring the blade down, roll it until the blade starts to contact the wood and give me a shaving. But it's a shear cut because the wood is hitting this blade at an angle. It's slicing.
Is that still a swift back?
Yep, you can do it with the standard ones too. I can show you how to do that. So there I'm getting a shaving, still out of round. And so you want the blade at somewhere like 45 degrees or even steeper to the wood that's hitting it. The wood is attacking it at an angle, essentially. And faster speeds will give you a better finish. Starting to get round. Now, as I go up the bowl with that cut, I have to gradually roll the gouge to the right because the curvature is changing as I go. Otherwise, you'll suddenly find no shavings will be coming off and you'll lose contact with the edge. But this is way smoother. You can see the tear out down here and now it's all clean up here. That's what this cut does.
Like to sort of doing the slicing cut. To cut where the blade is.
Right.
Grain it down like a knife.
I think slicing and shearing are sort of synonymous.
Yeah.
I'll try and start down here. And you can go either direction, but figure out what works best for this piece of wood. Now I'm having to roll the gouge inwards.
When you're doing the push cut like that, are you riding the bevel?
Yep, it's very close to the bevel.
Yeah.
Now you can do a scraping cut like that. And again, your The gouge is steep, but it's, it got it about 10 after 9 again. The upper part of the blade is not cutting. Just the lower part, and it's scraping because the bevel is well away from the wood and the heel is well away from it. So we can compare the results of those two cuts. And they're, this is definitely rougher where I was using the scraping cut. That's the end grain problem that you have with almost all bowls. Let's see if I can. That's a lot better. Now, these standard bowl gouges, the 1/4-inch gouge has a little bit of a straight edge on it. So you can do the same thing with that. You put that straight edge on the inside. And that's breaking the one rule, which
Going
is to
backwards.
cut with the leading edge of your tool. This is cutting with the back edge. And it's a super smooth cut. It's actually looks smoother than the swept back gouge. It feels smoother too. But it takes practice to keep that heel really close to the wood, keep the wood hitting this bit of a straight edge at an angle. So the older style, the bowl gouges take a little more skill, a little more practice. I'm going to show you a shortcut now. I'll start the hollowing process. It's called the Forsner cut.
That's the biggest one you got, like?
Yeah, 3-inch.
They make it just over 3 inches. Oh my goodness.
This is 3-inch.
That should stall that lathe.
So I want to gauge the depth, and I leave about 1/2 inch. Line it up. I'll line it up with the this rim down here. And then I'll line it up with the drill. And I usually just put my thumb on it. Right up to about 500. See how it goes. This is sometimes unpredictable. Depends on the quality of your Morse tapers, whether it holds or not. The beauty of this is it sets your depth, so you never have to measure it again. You just go to the bottom of your drill cut, and you're there. The other beauty is trying to cut the middle of the bowl, the wood is hardly moving. There's very little inches per foot going by your tool.
What size Forstner was that again, 2.5 inches?
Pardon?
What size Forstner was that, 2.5
It's a
inches?
3.
It's a 3-inch.
They're about $32 a Dan's.
Dan's?
Yeah.
Well, I guess you gotta go there.
You guys know what Dan's is? Dan's Max.
Oh, yeah.
These were that old stuff, the first place we only charging for our. Then we're $1,000 for money again. It usually gives us not any more of a break, but gives us a little bit. And we've now expanded his tool inventory. Oh, yeah, he's taken out some of the assistance supplies and everything in that thing is going to be better.
The other thing I do is whoops. This, so I don't have to reach across. I don't have to climb up on the bed. And I think it's safer
Oh, I think so too.
to,
When I took lessons with David Ellsworth, he had these.
so what I'm doing is riding the bevel, they say.
Get in your way.
Nope, I'm cutting with the middle of the flute and the right hand edge. So I'm cutting,
Mike, could you put that right in front of the camera? There you go.
So that's a traditional grind on there.
yes, this is a standard grind, 3/4 inch long and strong bowl gouge is called. And I'm rolling in towards the center. As you get farther out, if there's wood in the center, you'd have to bring it up almost horizontal and roll it up to just about 90 degrees. But that is unnecessary with this treatment. I am rolling towards the center to keep that right hand edge doing the work. So this takes a more complicated movement. I'm starting here, gradually rolling towards the middle. At the same time, I'm coming up to horizontal. That's not as easy as the spindle, as a swept back gouge and the fingernails. And it's also difficult to get started out near the edge. And you can hear a knot in it. So this is why it's got a good idea to have multiple tools, multiple weapons, multiple techniques. If something starts misbehaving, you just grab another tool or use another technique. This is a 3/8 standard bowl gouge. So when something misbehaves, first I'll try and make sure I'm close to the heel. Usually people have it too far off the heel, and I'll bring it down. When that doesn't work, I'll make sure the tool is sharp. When that doesn't work, I'll start to resort to a smaller tool, which I did here. Same motion, it starts down here and ends up here and rolled at the same time. And now we can do the same effect with these with the swept back gouges. This is again the roughing cut. It's identical to the one we did on the outside. And that meant the chuck got loose. I sort of expected that. It's just full of water and it gets squeezed out. So now I can either push or pull with this fingernail gouge. One thing that I want to, pushing puts less stress on whatever's chucking it. If you've got a glue joint chucking it or something like that, you're going to preserve it by pushing inwards. Also, when you get near the edge, if you're coming outwards, the wood on the edge has no support and you're taking some risk. So along the edge, going in like this is very helpful. And Ed brought up a really good point. Wherever this bevel is pointed, if you put your hand on that, that's where the tool is going to want to cut. You're setting the direction. If I want to cut parallel to the outside, I align that thing parallel to the outside and go in. Of course, never taking too big a cut.
Basically, like Mike said, you're taking just a little bit of the shoulder so you can get the tool right.
There's a big notch in the rim. So here I'm staying 90 degrees to the face, horizontal tool, 45 degrees. I guess I'm about at 130 now instead of 1030.
You don't hear it.
Once you've got your rim thickness established, it gives you support for the other tools. Otherwise, they're unsupported at the rim. I'll go back to standard tool here and do some more hollowing. I don't know if you can see in there, but the tool is making a trajectory. It kind of goes up and across and then comes down. And that's to keep the bevel close to the wood.
And that's on the right edge.
That's all on the right edge, the leading edge. No, I've just got this down to a 1/4 inch less. So it's not gonna be twice turned. What it's gonna be is once turned oval. If I don't, the important thing is to finish it right away while it's still round. And it gives you control. I've still got a notch on the edge. I take a tool that takes very little wood off for best control. Quarter inch standard gouge, standard bowl gouge. I'm not sure you can even get these because these tools I think were forged. And nowadays, most of them are bar stock that have been a channel milled in it. And I'm just, haven't been shopping for those. So the last tool, which, there it is a scraper, which is a real godsend for doing the bottom and partway up the sides, as long as it's round. But it's changes shape while you're turning. Scrapers are pointed downward slightly. They're cutting with just the burr from the grindstone. There's a tiny burr there, and doesn't last very long. We'll put a little pressure on it. Can't quite see what I'm doing here.
Light that shining in there, just to help you out so you can see it. And it's valuable to you.
About 3/4 of the way down, yeah, right up there.
Yeah,
Lampshade.
I'll go as far as I can, as sometimes I'll round it with the scraper. Yeah, I can get some work done. It's giving some vibration, so I can back it up with my fingers. Like you do in spindle turning. Another trick is to turn the scraper on its edge so you're getting a shear cut. The wood is hitting that burr at an angle, but you're a little bit more likely to leave tracks. But at least you can get some of that standing grain out of the way. Also, if you slow it down and don't use the tool rest, just mostly, you can follow the warp and still scrape it. I'm a little bit high in the middle. I don't know, how are we doing for time, Ed? How are we doing for time? Okay, okay. We can use those shear cuts on the inside, but they're a little more risky. You'd use those before scraping normally. And I'll often bring the rest around so I can work at 90 degrees to the wood. You can see the kind of shaving this little 1/4-inch bowl gouge gives you.
Off the left edge, Mike,
It's off the back edge, right? Or the edge you're not supposed to be using.
yeah, I want everybody to understand that we're talking about, David uses this very efficiently. But a lot of us are a little nervous because of the potential capability of that, so you're gonna pay attention in any cut. But that one, you could launch that left way up.
The 1/4-inch isn't so bad because even if it does catch, it's not gonna catch much wood compared to some of the others with a long blade. I want to get this groove out of here and then kind of leave it at that. Now,
You look like a landscape.
yeah, can you see the light coming through it? Here and here.
Yeah, what's the end curve?
That's the sap. The sapwood is more translucent.
There now.
Well, it's probably 3/16 maybe. It's less than, I think it, or close to a 1/4. Just come up and look at it. I think we'll give it a rest. I thank you all. Mhm.